Okay, so today is Tuesday, October 11th, and you should have turned in your vocab if you were here yesterday. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to watch yesterday's lesson 1010. Okay, so we are doing some close reading today with our story, The Landlady, and we're going to start off with the second question that we looked at yesterday about how a third-person limited omniscient perspective creates suspense for the reader in The Landlady. So you will need your notebook again today, and let's look at some other materials that you're going to need. You're going to need your text, the Landlady PDF here, and you'll need this as well. So for this document, please create a copy for yourself electronically or print. So again, copies can be created by going out to File and then making a copy for yourself. So you can type in these boxes if you don't have a printer, or print out and write in them. Okay, so let's go back to that question. So in your notebooks, I want you to answer this as best you can. Pause me, give it a shot. What I do want you to make sure that you're doing in your responses, and I want you to use this vocab language, these common terms that we've established. So third person and limited omniscient are going to be really important in your response. And so as you're responding, you're thinking about, why is it suspenseful that throughout the entire story we don't know what the landlady is thinking? Why would that create suspense for a reader? Okay, go ahead and respond. Okay, so we shared out as a class, and we shared with each other, but this is the beginning. This is what I would like the beginning of your claim to look like, where basically you're just literally repeating the prompt to me, and then you're adding a because statement or a by statement, where you go on to explain to me how it created suspense. So we just did a little quick practice with claim, and then we moved on to our notebooks. So last week we talked a little bit about this triangular structure here, and a lot of students were like, oh, it's plot mountain, which is a very cute way to say that it is the narrative arc. So the narrative arc is the basic structure of most stories throughout history, where we have the exposition, which is just the beginning. Then we have the middle, which is kind of the rising action, which leads us up to the climax, and then we come down to the end. So today we're just going to be focusing on rising action, because throughout the first month of school we've been focusing on how suspense is developed in suspense stories. And in The Landlady, all of the suspense happens really as we're climbing up this mountain, so to speak. So in this rising action. You may have noticed that in The Landlady, it's incredibly frustrating because we don't get a clear answer about what happens. So, you know, Billy's given the tea to drink, and he says, this tastes like bitter almonds. And then we find out that the landlady stuffs her pets, and that she's still got the two young guys up in her another room. And we find out that probably Billy's also going to die and end up stuffed with her other creatures. So that just kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger. It doesn't tell us that he does die or that anything else happens, after the point of him drinking the tea. We can only assume the worst for poor Billy Weaver. So that is why our narrative arc is so long here in the rising action, because it takes a lot to kind of get to that point of he drank the tea, and then we kind of fall off the mountain here because we really don't know whether he lived or died. So really there's like I could just delete this because there's no rising action. There's no falling action or resolution. It's just like, whoop, tea, don't know. So what I want you to do in your notebooks is draw. I'm just going to put that back because it's bugging me. Okay, so go ahead and draw this structure. And then I do want you to write rising action equals suspense development somewhere near this long line. And what we did, and I can't represent this to you because I only have a computer, but we did plot. We wrote by hand the different events that led up to this climax, that climactic point of when he drank the tea, and you figure out that she likes taxidermy, which is when you stuff, typically animals. So I want you to use your memory of the landlady and just give me about 3 to 4 different events that take us up this mountain and build suspense. So I'll start you off with the first one down here at the bottom that we talked about. It was when Billy Weaver kind of walks by the landlady's bed and breakfast, and he sees the sign, bed and breakfast, and it seems to pull him in. He can't quite get himself away from the entrance. And so that was really the first sign of something strange. Like, why can't he just walk away from this bed and breakfast? Some sort of force is making him go inside. A lot of other people said at the beginning that the landlady opens the door right as he rings the bell. And so it was almost like she was waiting for him or watching him or planning on him being there. So those were our first actions that created suspense. So again, 3 or 4 actions that led up to this climactic moment. In your own words, no need for text evidence in your notebooks. All right, so I just told you that. 1 minute stretch break, great. Okay, now we practice some vocab. And if you don't have your vocab, you can just simply find the vocab words here in Landlady Materials. Open this up for these words as a reference. So I had students use all 7 vocab words to ask a landlady or landlord for a room to rent for the weekend. So you can do this on a separate piece of paper. You can do this on the back of your vocab sheet if you have it. You could type it up. Just practice using those words. It can sound a little funky because it's just practice, but make sure to use all of them. Okay. All right, that's tomorrow. Great, so the last thing that we're going to do in this lesson is I want you to open this document, have your own copy, whether you printed it or made it electronically, and we're going to work through the first and second question together because we didn't get to the third one today. So this year we've been focusing on how authors develop suspense, and we've been looking at techniques such as foreshadowing, word choice for tone and mood, perspective, point of view, and now we've got 3 more techniques that authors can use in order to create suspense in the reader. So technique 1 says element of surprise through contrast. So all this means is when in a text the author makes something seem one way, and then it turns out to be a different way later on in the text, which kind of takes the reader by surprise. So we had a lot of surprises in The Landlady, I'd say, and there was a lot of contrast where we thought something was going to be, for example, the dog. So at the beginning of the story, we thought the dog was alive, we thought it was cute and cuddly and kind of balled up by the hearth, and then it turns out later in the story that the dog is dead and stuffed and cold. So we have this contrast of alive versus dead, warm versus cold, and that kind of creates some anxiety for the reader. So what I want you to do is I want you to think of 2, and I already gave you 1, 2 examples of where the author, Roald Dahl, creates contrast for the reader. And so you're going to quote it. So, for example, I would need to find evidence from the text of where I see the dog on the hearth doing its thing. So I have no idea. So I'm just going to go like this. I don't know a direct quote off the top of my head. Okay, so here's my quote showing the dog on the hearth, alive and warm. And then the way that I correctly cite something is I put the author's last name, and by the way, this is on page 172, so then I go to page 172. I don't know if it's the same in this version though. Oh, it's not. You're going to have to figure that out. Okay, so there we go. Okay, and then on this section, I will quote when I find out that the dog is actually dead and stuffed. Such a great story that we're reading. Okay, let's say 175. Okay, so that's that. And then you're going to need to find another example where something seemed one way, but then it turned out to be another. The second way that authors can create suspense is by making the reader feel tension. And there are different types of tension. So we could have character-to-character tension, when a character's goal is different than another character's goal and they just don't seem to go well together. So I want you to think about, what is the landlady's goal? What does she want to do? And what is Billy Weaver's goal? Now, if you said the landlady's goal is to kill Billy and stuff him and keep him, you are correct. And if you said Billy's goal is to become a successful businessman / not die / wake up in the morning and eat some eggs, you are correct. And so those two things don't go together. Successful businessman and death. There's no way you can have a great life if you're not living. So that creates tension. So that's one way. And then I want you to think about over here in the character-to-reader tension, any time in the text that for you as a reader, you felt tension because a character made you feel uncomfortable or kind of weird or like kind of unsure of what was going to happen. And there's plenty of that within the landlady. So here I need evidence as well. So you're going to need to find evidence of what the landlady wants. What's her goal? Okay. And then what Billy Weaver wants. All right. And over here, it'll be when you as a reader felt tension because of something the character was doing or saying. Great, so that's 1 and 2, and tomorrow we'll work through 3. Thank you.